My name is Timur Bondarev. I am the managing partner and founding partner at Artsinger. I thank the organizers for this opportunity to moderate this amazing panel. First of all, you might have a question of what do lawyers have to do with agriculture, but on the other hand, just considering the topic that we have at hand, it's my pleasure to be here because we as legal professionals see many very interesting projects concerning innovation in different sectors of the economy of Ukraine. And agriculture, even though it's a very conservative sector, is still no exclusion, and we see a lot of projects here with a lot of international investors and Ukrainian companies alike implementing innovation in agriculture. And of course, these projects will need quality legal assistance to be implemented. In any case, I think we're going to have an immensely interesting panel. First of all, I'd like to present our speakers. And secondly, we are going to cover our ground here. And I hope that you're going to participate in our discussion, and we'll be very happy to hear about your reflections, comments, and opens. So, we have Olga Trofimtseva, who is the Deputy Agriculture Minister of Ukraine, dealing with European integration. We thank the Deputy Minister for making it here despite her tightly packed schedule. And we also have Yulia Poroshenko, who is the co-founder of AgroHub and co-founder of AgroTech project. She also worked with General Electric, McKinsey, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and has ample experience in consulting major corporations. We also thank Mr. Michael Horsch, who is the founder and the owner of Horsch Landmaschinen GmbH, which deals with manufacturing agricultural machines. He is a representative of classic German business, and it's a company with a family tradition. And Michael knows Ukraine for over 20 years, and his reflection on how Ukraine has changed, what happened in Ukraine throughout these years. And we had a very interesting conversation as we were preparing for this panel, and I heard many things from a very different perspective about our country. And I hope that you will be able to ask questions to Michael. We also have Vitaly Ilchenko. He is the owner and director of the Ukrainian major Ukrainian manufacturer of plant protection chemicals. So agriculture cannot be imagined without these modern means of protecting your plants. And we will probably want to hear Vitaly's opinion about how to introduce innovation and new technology to build a successful business. We're also going to listen to Vitaly's opinion on what are the best ways and what are his plans on further using technologies to lead and develop innovative business. So what are we going to talk about? Oh, by the way, Mr. Borshevsky couldn't make it here due to an urgent business trip. I just heard this in the morning today. This is why we're going to have more time for questions and answers. So what are we going to talk about? If you look at the name of our panel, It's clear that we're going to work on not very traditional things, because as we talk about agriculture, we're already talking about the land market, about the moratorium, about all of these things we're not going to talk about, okay? Because everybody knows about everything. It's very clear we're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about how we see Ukraine in the future and the agriculture of our country in the future with high technologies. So we'll try to figure out whether or not we need technologies, because many people say that in order for Ukraine to be a successful country, we have great geographical position, we have talented people, and that I heard a lot of comments and thoughts about my clients who think, why do we have to invest in innovation? Because sooner, in one way or another, we have a low salary level, we have low labor costs, we have low land costs, our land is of supreme quality, so why do we need to invest additional? But we understand that the world is changing meanwhile, and that there are examples of such countries of Ireland, as Israel, and the Netherlands, who, without such superb land resources, who don't have this amazing geopolitical position and these ideal climatic zones, are still leaders and they're far ahead of Ukraine in many parameters. They're much smaller, they don't have such great input data, but they have already been able to demonstrate to the entire world that they are successful in agriculture. So is there anything we're doing wrong? Maybe we should think about technology, maybe we should think about the experience of other countries, or should we even thoughtlessly consider experience of other countries without analyzing and scrutinizing it? Because there is an opinion that we can take any kind of technology in Israel and Netherlands and just start applying it thoughtlessly in Ukraine. Is it possible? Is it going to work? Because we have already some negative use cases. You know, because whatever's good for them is not necessarily good for us. So we're going to talk about how you can use the potential of Ukraine in terms of our culture, of our budding startup culture. Ukraine has already shown itself globally as a country of startups. And we're going to talk about whether Ukrainian technology has a future in agriculture inside of the country, domestically. Because many Ukrainian technologies and many Ukrainian startups end up being famous worldwide, because WhatsApp, for example, was founded by Ukrainians. But in agriculture, on the other hand, there are a lot of technologies which are Ukrainian technologies are still not enjoying very much popularity. So we're thinking whether let's contemplate on whether our country can benefit from these things. Our conversation is going to be in Ukrainian mostly, and when you ask questions, please ask your questions slowly so that the interpreters can handle translation. But you can also ask in English. First of all, all of our panelists will allow them to make an opening remark, and then we're going to have an actual panel discussion, after which we will allow you to ask questions. We'll open the floor for questions. So I'd like to pass the floor to Ms. Trofimtseva, Deputy Minister Trofimtseva. Ladies go first. And she, as a representative of the Ministry of Agrarian Policy, will tell us about the opinion of the ministry and implementation of high technologies for the industry, and then we will transfer the microphone to Yulia Poroshenko and then other speakers. So first of all, I'd like to say that I'm very grateful to be at this forum because there are some very interesting discussion here. There's some speculative discussion here, but I'm very happy about the topic of this panel discussion because I don't really like the title, but then again, sometimes well, why am I against the name of this panel? Because I'm not really in agreement with the definition of Ukraine as an agrarian country. But then we understand that it's related to the role as our agrarian and industrial complex, and I insist on calling it that, plays in the development of our country and our foreign economic activity. And respectively, if we base our discussion on this definition that our agrarian country, in terms of the role of the agrarian and industrial complex in our economy, then I'm going to agree with the name of this panel discussion, and we can discuss whether or not, or how rather, the state can help, how the ministry help in order for us to transition evolutionally from the existing legacy agrarian industrial complex structure that we have now and our structure of foreign economic activity in agrarian industry and the structure of investment, including international investment as well, to the situation that we will want to see in our country in 20, 30, 50 years. So, of course, this is a very clear and understandable topic, but on the other hand, for me, even though I don't really like when we start talking about IT and innovation and some of these things, smart agriculture in Ukraine, too often it's considered as something too generalistic by the public, something very nice sounding, but something unfortunately lacking in substance and lacking in figures and without specifics, regrettably. But regarding specifics about agribusiness and why it's a very specific thing about innovation and agtech, agricultural tech, why we relate this closer to business, I'd like to come back to this thought of how and what is happening as of today if we're talking about the evolutionary transition of the country from a mostly agrarian country to an evolutionary development into an agrarian technological country or more of a high-tech country. Right now, I'm using this. I'm using this discussion talking point that the agrarian sector industry has a high level of expectation of changes, overnight changes by our partners. But in fact, what is happening lately for the last years of independence, to the best of my knowledge and belief, is evolutionary in nature, where something that it's a long way that we're going, and we're evolving to this stage, including economic development when we're talking about agrarian sector, where to a stage where we're ready for you could call it a qualitative leap, because we have an accumulation of these quantitative changes. And the quantitative changes I'm talking about is something that you probably know about. When we come back to the 1990s in our agrarian sector, I don't want to I don't want to give you too much detail because most of you probably know this very well. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of primary accumulation of capital, not only in the agrarian sector, but in economics, and a bit more political instability and other things as well. Maybe import dependence. If we remember the imports of wheat in Ukraine, something that would be hard to imagine right now. So what happened after this chaotic primary stage is the formation of a more civilized market environment, including in the agrarian sector,
which enabled us to be at pretty good positions these days, in a pretty good state, in even exporting certain kinds of production and manufacture, especially agrarian produce, where I would like to put a special stress, because we keep hearing that only criticism that we are just a raw material additive to some, or supplement to some geographical areas, which is not also true. But why not? Because on the one hand, of course, we do export a lot of raw materials, like crops, grain crops in particular, but this is just because of our cutting edge in this area. And by the way, I do not quite agree, because the cheap labor force, because this benefit is quickly becoming a legacy of the past, and I believe that in the medium term, or perhaps even faster than that and sooner than that, our wage rates and salary rates are going to be on a par with our Eastern European counterparts and neighbors, because of the migration of labor force, and all of the other processes are global. We're not standing aside. And this benefit, this advantage is losing its weight in Ukraine, and we need to look for other advantages, other upsides to continue being successful in the world. And if we talk about the role of the state in this evolutionary development, you may have heard my position. I'm not a great supporter or fan of just dispensing subsidies or the direct financial state benefits, which also relates to the sphere of agrarian policies, agrarian production. When we speak about targeting, particular, one of the target instruments and tools in this respect, which can open up new opportunities, new benefits for startups, inclusive the ones that deal with drone manufacturing or any other technologies applicable to agriculture, which will enable this sector to become more transparent, more highly technological, from the first link in this chain to the very last one, so as to please and satisfy the final user, the end users. The state has a great many number of other tools in its toolkit in using information support, knowledge transfer, programs, everything to do with education. I mean, some basic educational standards when we talk about consultancy, extension services, and if it's large-sized companies that are already engaged in this, then small and medium-sized companies still have to be helped by the state, and here the role of the state comes into play more seriously. So to wrap up my presentation, all of those who know me know that I am an optimist by nature, and if we're talking about Ukraine and Ukrainian agrarian complex, I keep saying that everything will be Ukrainian, everything will be agro, not in a sense that we will only be exporting crops and grain crops, but I'm certain, 100% certain, that this way that we have covered in the 27 years of our independence, but much faster, will have to be repeated, continued, because as the presenter was right in saying, everything is so fast changing these days, so fast paced, we cannot just stand aside or lag behind. All we have at our disposal is to be proactive And speaking of experience, of course, we can look aside at what Israel, for instance, is doing. I'm a great fan of what they do in technologies and startup-wise. We can look at what Germany is engaged in. We can do it what Japan is up to, any country in the world. But at the same time, we still have to opt for our own pathway. We still have our own brains that at the expense of the grains grown in Ukraine will still be able to make money for themselves, make a living for themselves, and produce revenues for the country and result in making Ukraine into a highly technological country that will be just as successful at selling flour, grain, wheat, proteins, soybeans, I don't know, that will be manufactured due to some very high standard technologies, whilst at the same time to be able to sell drones and complex solutions for farming estates and other things which will be software packed with, in order to ensure that our agriculture is more effective and climate smart, more sustainable, so that worldwide we should be able to present not only our grains but also our brains. Thank you very much, Olga, which basically means learn from everyone, pick up everyone's brains. Thank you very much for sticking to the timeline. Let me remind you that we are only taking 10 minutes. We are giving 10 minutes to every panelist, and then we will launch into our discussion. Panelists, please be reminded to speak more slowly so that our interpreters can catch up with you now. The floor goes to Yulia Poroshenko. What do you think of Ukraine's future? What is your experience in this field? So 10 minutes is yours. Thank you, Timur. As an ex-counselor, I cannot do without slides of my presentation. One of the major problems that Ukraine is facing in its agrarian sector is the lack of labor force. So we have an HR shortage, something that Olga has just mentioned. And there are a few reasons for that. The chief of them is the global one, urbanization, which right now comprises 50%, and it's expected that by 2030, this rate will rise to 70%. I have a proposal regarding how we can very simply solve this problem. Let's tomorrow get ourselves together, pack all of our suitcases, leave all of our jobs, and move to the country. Let's engage in the farming, in toiling the land, just like our great-grandparents used to do it, or even our grandparents. I can immediately see the expressions in your face, and I don't think a lot of you would be able to take such drastic measures. Therefore, we will have to do a lot in order to raise technologies, develop automation, which will enable us to reduce the involvement of human factor, use robotics, artificial intelligence. And here a good example may be Israel again. Let me illustrate my point by saying that one Chinese agrarian worker can feed 4 individuals. One agrarian worker in Ukraine can feed 15 individuals. How many do you think an agrarian worker in Israel can feed? 115 individuals, which means 8-fold increase, much more productive work than it is now in Ukraine. And the main reason for why in Israel the produce manufacture is so effective is because they do a lot of intense agrarian work. They introduce the cable networking, automation, and robotics. So basically, due to innovations and technologies, only due to them will we be able to resolve the dilemma, which at the first glance seems to be not possible to tackle, how we can produce more using fewer resources. We know that the world population is growing, the consumption of food is growing, and it's expected that by 2050, the consumption in terms of food will rise by 70%. But we can see the reverse is true about the resources. We've already spoken about the human factor. Water resources are being depleted. The amount of arable land because of the climate change is also dropping. So let me repeat myself. It's only due to innovations and technologies we will be able to produce more with fewer resources. Good news is about the fact that the elements of the technologies which are basically applied in agrarian production, in agrarian technologies, agrarian produce making, getting cheaper sensors and cameras, they're all declining in their prices, which results to the fact that AgroTech startups are growing in number. So if you look at the line graph or bar charts at how investments in AgTech have been changing over the last years, we can see a steep rise. In 2012, more than 10 million. In 2015, more than 12 billion was invested in this sector, and it just continues to rise, which results in the fact that these days in the world there are more than 1,000 operational working solutions, not at the level of prototype, but well up and functioning operational technologies. But one thing relates to AgTech technologies. I suppose some of you who have your own garden or orchard, vegetable garden, you know that if you bring a sapling from France, you cannot expect the same yield in Ukraine as it was in France. The same is true for technologies. It's impossible to take AgTech startups from Israel or the US and expect the same profitability in Ukraine. It's highly necessary to give some time for adaptation, for running pilot versions, or better still, to create domestically made decisions, which will be based on our local specificity, on the quality of our land, on the weather, on the level of education, and the employees. So being conscious of all this, we have created the platform called AgroHub, which is called to help and raise the number of Ukrainian startups, while at the same time equipping Ukrainian agrarians with qualitative information in order to deploy the solutions which are already available in the world. To make it more simple, the stage of implementing innovations can be broken into 3 stages, where the first one is diagnosing. First of all, we need to define or identify which particular innovation the company in question will have to implement, where the greatest needs lie. Next, out of this whole multiplicity and variety of solutions, one needs to pick and choose the solution which will be most effective. The number of applications for farm management systems in Ukraine are over 20 in Ukraine alone. So to be able to understand which of these solutions is best applicable for any company, one needs to dig deep and to do qualitative analysis. And third stage is the implementation, which is inseparable from the development of your HR and the change of the corporate culture in the company. Now, through a very simplified example, I would like to show you how we do our diagnostics. We have the 5 stages of maturity. In order to identify the stage for any process which is operational in any company, through this slide you can see the process of land management from 0 level or dummies level, when everything is paper format, no digitization is applied. Next level is beginner, when at least there is a minimal level of digitization. Next one is the application of satellite technologies, being followed by using drones, quadrocopters, etc. So defining at which stage any company is, we end up having such a map through which we are able to say that a company can prioritize certain areas of work and be specific in terms of its understanding where it should be headed. We have conducted this research with the support of Raiffeisenbank in Ukraine. We have done it for over 20 companies, and I think in a month's time we will be able to present a large-scale report, which on the one hand will demonstrate which innovations are in greatest demand for companies, and on the other hand, which of the operational solutions are being applied and result in very good efficiency. Thank you, Julia, for your comprehensive report, for your interesting insights in terms of innovations. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Horsch. Those of you who do not understand English, would you kindly pick up your earphones to be able to hear the translation?
Again, you've been around for almost 20 years, and you are in a really unique situation because you have been seeing Ukrainian agriculture business growing, actually. So I assume that all major agri-oligarchs, all major agri-holdings, as they're called today, you remember them actually in their, so to say, child shoes. So what's your impression? Have really innovations penetrated Ukrainian business? Do you see all these prescription farming, precision farming, drones, technologies, are they really around in Ukraine? Have they really helped Ukrainian business to become global? Do you really think that they are efficient? Can you perhaps compare your Ukrainian view with everything what's happening outside of Ukraine? Please, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, it's also a pleasure for me to be in front of such a young audience, by the way. Yeah? And this also shows where Ukraine is going. So please, this is already something which is, I give you, I pay you a lot of respect because there's not old people sitting in here. So it means where you're going. Anyway, my background is I'm a farmer. As a young farm boy, 37 years ago, I started a company, Horsch, basically from a need. At that time, my family, fathers and uncles, they were pioneers in farming without a plow. That means they wanted to take care more about soil and improve soil structure and increase humus content. The lack of machinery, that was basically a challenge for me, being educated as a farmer, not as an engineer, to basically come up with ideas with seeding technologies which we needed for our family first. And out of that, I started a company which today is luckily become one of the world leaders in modern seeding, tillage and planting. But that was not my main approach. My main approach was trying to basically make a change, help to make a change in farming 37 years ago. Obviously, 25 years ago, when I first came here to Ukraine, the intention was selling our technology and our equipment to Ukraine. At that time, Ukraine was still coming out of a socialistic type, kolkhoz type farming, where technologies and methods and organizations and thinking was rather antique or rather backward thinking. Obviously, I realized, and we knew that by history, that Ukraine has one of the best and biggest resource of best land, cropland in the world. But yet the management and the thinking and the organization structure of farms was not willing to accept technologies we were trying to offer in those days. But gradually we started to grow with some of the more professional farmers and cooperative farmers and also farmers that went private. And then we learned that it's not about selling machinery and technology to your country. It's first about trying to find the movers, the first movers, and trying to help them, to educate them, to understand how to use new technologies. And what I was most amazed is that maybe in the 90s, it was still a few we could find that were willing to really learn together with us to really improve farming in a much more efficient way in Ukraine. But I must say from 2000 on, it started to explode. And it was not foreign investors that came here from Germany, from Holland, from England, that basically started to show you farmers how to farm. There's still very few of them here. It's actually Ukrainian people, Ukrainian managers, Ukrainian farmers that either came from the old organizations and realized that they have to basically accept something that's new out there and learn with it and then adapt it, and also young people that come from universities and come from maybe also, well, it's interesting what I find is quite a few of the professional farmers today in Ukraine, they had experiences abroad. Like they went to American or German universities and did internships there. And actually they are the ones who are probably one of the leaders right now in farming. Both either they're working as managers for large holdings or they're independent private farmers. It doesn't matter. I find more and more of those people. And so that's why I can always advise to everybody, to young people, never try to only stay here in the country, always go out. Go out and get some education outside of your country, learn from other countries, learn also from the mistakes in other countries, and then come back, and then if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, try to use your entrepreneurial spirit. Saying that, today, I think, and I only can speak for the crop farmers in Ukraine, because that's where who I'm doing business with. You have reached a level of farming that is not far away, both from the holdings and also from the private individuals, from the level of the top farmers in the world, when it comes to efficiencies, when it comes to cost of production per ton. Actually, you want me? What do you want me to do? Like this, or like an ice cream cone, huh? Okay. Sorry. And what I see now is that because your question was, is there a next level of technology, which is maybe digitalization, which now will make a much bigger change to agriculture than what happened from 2000 till today? Since my company is driving digital and precision farming technologies also, as much as selling seeding and planting and tillage equipment, I want to warn you, don't become a digital junkie and think that's the way to control Mother Nature. Mother Nature is a very strange animal. Mother Nature is not necessarily a thing that eventually you can control completely digital. To understand Mother Nature, you need multi-talented people. Most of the farmers I work with in this world, most of the professional farmers I work with in this world, whether it's in North America, whether it's in Brazil, whether it's in Western Europe or Eastern Europe, or Australia and so on. That's where we do our business. I always find that the most professional ones are not the ones who are maximum digitalized. The most professional ones are the most experienced and multi-talented people. And I think that's the key, also from a political side, to create an environment to let multi-talented people to develop and not leave the country. Because that's what's needed first. Digitalization is only a means. to drive innovation and technology. So far, I must say, when I look at farmers, professional farmers that highly adapted digital technologies, that means they sit more in the office, look behind screens and look satellite images and drones and whatsoever, rather than going out in the field and themselves really watching what's going on. They are the ones who are less profitable than the ones who are using a certain amount of digital technology to just help them to make quicker decisions, but at the end use their gut feeling, use their skills and their experiences, which they only can develop when they're out there where things are happening, when they're together with Mother Nature, with the soil, with the people, with the machinery, with the plants, and every day and every minute, every second, learning what decision need to be taken to be most efficient. And just a very simple explanation: if you're in crop farming and you plan your seeding and everything is going very well, and you have 5 millimeters of rain, it can change everything within 2 minutes. And you cannot control this with digital. You have to do it yourself. And the more the managers are directly involved with things that are happening out there, the more professional they are, the higher the level of productivity is, and the more money they make today. Saying that, I know that there's a new level of digitalization together with artificial intelligence and whatsoever, which we're also working on, and autonomy coming, that we need to investigate, and we also need to investigate local. That's why I support a lot of local activities like what we're talking about today, that you actually create an environment that you let young people and young organizations, startups, develop in country together with multi-talented farmer to develop new digital technologies to help them to make even better decisions and make and quicker decisions and so on. And I think what you're trying to do here and what you're doing here in Ukraine, I think this environment is starting to grow. And I think I also have the feeling that the politics are doing a lot of good to make this happen. And I only can urge you to go on and to create this environment to let multi-talented people develop and not just not grow specialists. That's the thing from the past. We don't need specialists anymore. We need multi-talented people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Danke. Дякую дуже за дуже.
Thank you very much indeed for this interesting presentation. We have heard a very successful foreign businessman in terms of his thinking of Ukraine. Now I would like to give the floor to another successful but Ukrainian businessman, Vitaly Ilchenko, to share his vision on technologies and their implementation in the life of his company, and whether or not the future for Ukrainian agrarian complex can be connected with high technologies, and if you are planning to have anything special to take place in the foreseeable future through your company's activities. Once again, don't be hasty for our interpreters. Thank you for your question. Good afternoon, dear friends. On the one hand, we have spoken about the tip of the iceberg, but now I would like to share more about what's happening now in our modernity. As a result, as the outputs of our activities, the largest desert in Europe is in our country, in Ukraine. It's increasing year in and out, and unfortunately, a lot of land in Ukraine is depleted, is degrading in its quality. Not many are thinking of it now. Technologies which are applied these days are an effect of what we inherited. It's the legacy This is the result that we have this desert in Ukraine. And the young people who are graduating from university, they cannot tell wheat from sweet corn in the field apart. So if you ask this graduate to protect sweet corn from pests, of course, they will only destroy the product itself.
Throughout the last several years, many scientists and agrarian professionals have emigrated, and many educational establishments have close down, and this sad trend is creating this many companies are still using old technologies, and they're still thinking that all of these ways are right, are correct, and that not many companies really implement cutting-edge technologies. So it's including soil analysis, including plant protection, and so forth. So we decided to create a plant health institute in June of this year. And this is what we aim is to be one of the better agricultural research institutions in Eastern Europe. We intend this to be very ambitious. And unfortunately, Ukraine is right now just floating downstream. We're not doing, everyone's very high up ahead. And we're still thinking, oh, maybe we'll just get a better president, or and we need to move, and we need to move fast, because the world is changing, and while we're floating, it's swimming downstream ahead of us. So we're trying to create this institution in order to retain the scientists and researchers who are in Ukraine, and we're trying to involve those who have emigrated. And it's important for us to create high-tech solutions in Ukraine, and for them to export these solutions from Ukraine into other countries of the world. So right now we're working on another ambitious project, which is an biochemical industrial park, which is a cluster of companies which unites companies around the agrarian sector, because humanity can actually live off modern agriculture. Whatever is grown on the soil can be used to replace all of the synthetics that are used by humanity today. And now our scientists and researchers are building products which you know how agriculture is going to look like. We have an AI-like system which is going to monitor with drones and satellites, and in case there's some kind of a need in the field, the system is going to produce that right away. And with a drone, it's going to be precision. It's going to be applied with precision. It's going to be organic. It's going to be environmentally friendly. And we're only going to introduce the right kind of product in the right quantity in and we're preparing a platform which is going to be an internship for students, because students spend 5 years of their life for some kind of introductory theories which could become obsolete by the time they graduate, and with this introductory knowledge they can't really do anything in practice, so we have to basically retrain them. So we're trying to train them in practice, so that after the graduation they will be able to join the biochemical, chemical, or agrarian industries as employees. So we are trying to also introduce energy saving and resource efficient technologies for our agrarian partners, which we collaborate with, so that we could work on the ground with as much efficiency as possible and to get good results, so that we don't hurt the environment as well. Now we're also doing a lot of analytical services, such as all of these services were available only in the United States, the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands. And now all of these services are also accessible and available in Ukraine. Now we can do sampling. We do sample research, sample analysis, and we can give recommendations and advice on how to improve your soil, and what kind of tools could be used in order to get the highest quality crop yield and maximum yield as possible. And these analytical services, which would cost you 3,000 to 5,000 hryvnias, which is hundreds of dollars, they can give you hundreds of thousands of dollars in yield, which I'll say a few words. There are some opponents, especially among agronomists, because they have a budget, they don't want to spend it. They want to go abroad for using this budget, but they're the first opponents of these technologies being used in the field. Another thing is that a lot of agrarian manufacturers don't use these technologies because they don't understand. They understand that the land that they're using is renting, so they're not interested in long-term maintenance. So if they invest a lot into their land, there's a risk that there's 2 to 3 years their land is going to get scouted off by some malicious raiders, or there's going to be malicious takeover. So I've been told not to talk about this. So only thanks to collaboration between IT, business, we can turn our Ukraine into basically a Garden of Eden, like highly developed agricultural country. And we need to understand that we did not inherit our land from our parents, but rather we are borrowing it from our kids, from our children. Thank you. I'm a very big patriot of Ukraine, and it's very interesting for me to see when there are such companies in Ukraine which really compete with the global multinational corporations with their own high-tech R&D centers. So we really, Vitaly, my congratulations go to your business. And before we go to the question and answers section, I'd like to remind you that we have a Telegram bot, and if you and we're already getting questions through this bot. Finally, we have adopted it, so we're seeing adoption. But before we have audience questions, I'd like to ask some questions to the panelists. So you, as the representative of the ministry, is there a statewide policy or program or strategy on the development of higher technologies in the agrarian sector, or is there a permanent working group? So is Ukraine trying to stimulate this on the government level and stimulate the movement in this direction? Thank you very much. First of all, as for the strategy, as for a separate strategy for IT development and agrarian sector, there is none, but we have a general strategy rather, where we have sub-strategies or sub-strategies of sub-sectors, such as organic, which Vitaly mentioned, and ending with sustainable development and protecting the environment. Each of these strategies contains an element of technology and innovation across the board. So here, even I'm not sure if we have to have a separate strategy, which I'd like to hear the business's opinion about this. But regarding the second question, I'm very careful about the working group, because if you want to kill a good idea, make a working group. So I'm not sure if I can tolerate another working group, yet another working group in the Ministry of Agrarian Policy. But what changed in the last few years? The Ministry of Agrarian Policy is now participating and is an active contributor to all of the not only events, but all of the practical initiatives that are taking place that have something in common with agrarian technology and innovative development and AgTech. We work with an agrarian hub, and we work with separate companies. and the Agro-IT Forum, and other things. You know, the ministry is now, it's early to say that we are a champion or an evangelist of development for agrarian technologies, but the fact that we are trying to be in the epicenter of these events, I personally pay much attention to this because I believe that this is our future and our country's future. But there is no other way. I think that Agro-IT is going to play a central role in this sector because I think this is a horizontal topic which goes through all of that we've talked about, starting from HR and teaching and learning and R&D, and with Mr. Horsch and Mr. Vitali also mentioned this, because it's all human-centered, and that without this multi-talented human resources, which could give comprehensive solutions to our agrarian complex with this comprehensive vision, it's not going to work without them. Because without the smart agriculture, we can't really do without it. So if we don't ask these questions today, just 2 days ago we were discussing with Vienna, with the International Finance Corporation, we won't have a possibility to be competitive, and we won't have an opportunity a possibility to feed the world, and the growing population of the world, which Julia mentioned. Ukraine is in the five regions which are going to supply that, and on the other hand supply things like organics for the markets which will be able to buy it, and as well as produce high technologies together with Israel and Germany and for the rest of the world. Thank you. So for the level of the ministry, there's a systematic monitoring of trends. Not only monitoring, but I don't know about if the budget is going to be accepted. So I don't know if we can include state support programs of drones, state support programs for drone manufacturing, but maybe in 1 or 2 years we're going to do it. And I really want not only informational organizational support, but at least some financial support from the state for these young talented guys who I know personally who are doing all of this with an agricultural hub and business initiative, but the state has to give, if not a hand, but then at least a finger. When I was preparing this for this panel, I was trying to look for a reliable statistic on the level of penetration of AgTech in agriculture. I wasn't able to find any of that, or some kind of a comparison across the country. But Julia has this information. I think statistics are very, very important. So, first of all, statistics, and secondly, what holds the involvement of high-tech in agriculture, because we as a law firm, we work a lot with agriculture, and we work with large agricultural companies, and we service a lot of transactions, such as acquisition of assets, such as elevators and ports and mergers and acquisitions. But to be honest with you, I don't remember throughout the last 4 years, I don't remember some huge projects which would deal with the technological aspects. So the money which were borrowed by our clients, they were which would go for an innovative component or some kind of a huge R&D project, major R&D project in terms of raising efficiency. We were talking about some very mundane things, and the situation is still that at many levels. So what is limiting, and what is the statistics here? So to answer your first question about statistics, In reality, it's quite difficult to calculate the level of penetration of innovations in the agrarian sector, because some experts say that it's less than 5%. Some people say 15%, but it's because the mere presence of a tracker or a sensor doesn't mean that the data from it is being used effectively and efficiently, which means the company might or might not be equipped with the latest innovative inventions. So whether or not these innovations are used correctly, so there's an understanding that data culture is decision culture, and our colleagues from Smart Farming are now doing an exhibition about decision farming. And information without application is useless information. And about what hinders innovation, we are facing skepticism and disbelief in technology, and the agrarian sector is actually very conservative. And they say that, you know, it's just a fancy trend. Innovation is not really useful. And you could give an historic example of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was talking about Robert Fulton, who was first to explain to him the concept of a steamboat. He explained how the steamboat has to theoretically work, that theoretically Bonaparte will be able to use this innovation to conquer the United Kingdom, the British Empire. And Napoleon said, do you believe that you can make a boat sail against the stream just by lighting a fire against under its deck? I have no intention to develop such nonsense. So steamboats needed several decades to fully replace sailboats. And throughout this time, some companies continued to invest into sailboats, trying to make them better and try to ignore and deny the progress and the trend which was in existence with the first steamboats. And here it's very important not to miss out on the trends which are emerging in the world, and not to say that the agrarian sector is not about digitalization, it's not about innovation, because IT and agro are two different things, because finally you could figuratively speaking to get an amazing sailboat, a luxurious sailboat, which would lose in comparison to the shabbiest steamboat of your competitor. And secondly, it's corporate culture and people, because there is a statistic that 70% of all transformational programs, including innovation programs, fail. And when they started to investigate the reason, the number one reason was sabotage from the staff. Working with your staff is one of the most important factors, which has to be number one in your transformation and innovation strategy. Because any innovation is a newly introduced concept, is something new, it's exiting the comfort zone, and people, there's a drive to resist among people, because there's a status quo bias. People like their zone of comfort, they don't want to leave it. People want to do what they're doing, they don't want to change. This is why working with corporate culture, and not only in the agrarian sector, but in many other sectors, such as Barclays, Nestle, other companies, who say that that the change is impossible without an ownership culture, so that the employees feel like they own the business that they're doing, and they are internally motivated to reach the results and to make these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. In fact, here is a very interesting situation developing because in the first place, Ukraine is world famous as an IT country. Ukrainian developers and IT companies are famous worldwide, even abroad. Some of the companies know about these companies better than in Ukraine. And it's never failed to surprise me that why in the field of agriculture there isn't such a major boost for technologies, because this would be a really low-hanging fruit.
Why actually Ukrainian agricultural sector is not so innovated actually as it should be actually, given the local IT startup culture, etc. Can you please briefly comment on this from your angle as a foreigner who sees Ukraine from your point of view?
I'm not in a position to criticize you. And I don't completely agree that you think you're behind. I cannot accept this actually. Again, I think I have a feeling, and this feeling is based on very long and good observations, which I've obviously, because I travel so much here in Ukraine, and you have to understand, I'm more out in the country than most of you are. I see most of the villages and most of the people living in the villages and the farmers who farm the land, and I'm walking the land. I'm always dirty when I come home, you know, with my hands and with the shoes. So I see things that many of you don't see out there. And what I see is not really what you think it is. No. It's even though it's a very small plant of I want to understand, I want to find out how we can improve and so on. Yes, but I think, and again, when you talk about innovation, you always think digital, and be careful to always relate everything to be digital. Digital is only an instrument, like a tool, you know, to make a change, to make a fundamental change to something you think it's not going right. Yeah. And and I think you are further ahead in terms of grasping what needs to be done and needs to be worked on in terms of making changes, making improvements. And again, I only can speak for farming, you know, because that's what I understand, that what you think and what you feel here in Kiev. And on the other side, I think Kiev is the center of, of creating an environment, again, I'm coming back to what I said, creating an environment to let smart people, young people, people that are willing to make a change, willing to approach things completely different, where even though when I look at it from as an old man from the side and say, you know what, you're crazy, I don't think this is going to work what you do, but you know what, you better do it. If you don't do it, if you stop doing it, you never find out whether it's the right thing or the good thing to do. And anyway, I think you're further ahead in actually being able to generate things within the country of Ukraine in terms of this is Ukrainian intellectual property and not something that's been imported. I mean, I've just made a decision that I will build a factory within the next 2 or 3 years in Ukraine. And I bought already some land, and we're already making plans, just because I know I have to be part of this localization, part of this, not only just trying to sell things and export your foreign country to my country, and I understand that many other people, many other business people I know from outside Ukraine that do business with you, realizing they better come here and also be part of this. And one thing I hate to hear, I only come to Ukraine and build a factory because labor is cheap. I hate that. That's wrong. That's a wrong thinking. If you are able to do things very well and as good and as efficient as anybody else does, why should I at the end pay less? That's my thinking.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yeah. Коли я слухаю таких спікерів, як Майкл,
When I listen to such speakers as Michael, it always gives me a great pleasure to understand that there are such foreign investors who are much more patriotically minded than a lot of Ukrainian businessmen and politicians locally. I have a number of questions that have already been sent to the Telegram bot, via the Telegram bot. I would like to filter some of them because as we are walking, we always have to remember that we should remember where we are headed because we are tackling agrarian issues here. We're talking about technologies in the agriculture. And we have the first question to Mr. Ilchenko. In what way the Institute of Plant Protection can assist high technology projects in Ukraine? So please be brief, and then we will move on to the next question. Thank you for your interesting question. The Institute of Plant Health. Artificial intelligence needs to be trained, needs to learn a lot. A camera exists on its own. It's just a device that takes a snapshot, but then it needs to be digitized in order to understand and make sense of this image. We need to do some research in that plot where the camera captured an image to be able to record any changes, do some analytical investigation. So this is how we are training artificial intelligence. So without science, IT is non-existent. They are inseparable. So such projects can work through joint efforts between these two parties. This is something that we deal with. You mentioned one of the companies, MAA, if I'm not mistaken, one of the most innovative companies. They have a spectral camera which captures imagery via drones. And to teach artificial intelligence, we do this analytical research to compare the imagery captured through the camera in real-life terms. And we investigate the data obtained, and this is how we train artificial intelligence. And because of such scientific approach, I think we will achieve a lot in the future. Please be brief, be concise. Introduce yourself, please. Good afternoon. My name is Dmitro Zazura. I represent Smart Farming Company. We are an integrator. We introduce innovative technologies in Ukraine. What do we understand? We understand that in most companies that we work with, they have the request for technologies in one way or another. And recently, we've been thinking that now is the time, perhaps, to train as Olympic teams. So to join our efforts together, swap our experiences, but the implementation will be done locally and individually. In this context, my question goes to all of the panelists. Vitaly, in your R&D center, in your research cluster, which companies do you think will be most targeted? Michael, will you be interested in doing R&D in Ukraine? Yulia, do you think that Ukrainian business and Ukrainian companies are ready to combining their efforts? And Ms. Olga, we as initiators or instigators of this R&D center, can we approach the government and expect some specific means and measures? We don't need any task forces. We need some specific help. Thank you very much for a most interesting question. And by the way, we have a similar question on our Telegram bot.
Yes, I will come to Ukraine and have R&D work done in Ukraine, not because you're cheaper, but if I find out that you're better.
Great. Мені здається, що пан Хорш може спокійно.
It seems to be that Mr. Horsh can easily apply for the post of the next agrarian minister in Ukraine.
До нас ви можете прийти хоч за
Ms. Natalia, now you can approach us even now as the ministry with this initiative to make this Olympic team a fantastic definition that you have come up with, and you can expect us to help you with the further steps, because at our governmental level we do understand that we need to promote your ideas, first of all abroad, because export market or global market, let me put it in another way. I always reiterate that no matter whether it's an Olympic team or a small farmer, each of them has to sense and feel that they are part of this global world. Especially when we talk about global IT, we stand no chances. We are not talking here only about our domestic market, we're talking about the globalized market. So the first thing we can do, how to help, is to lend you our helping hand. Second of all, as I said, I truly hope there is already right understanding at the level of the government. Mr. Horsch has already stressed this, that at the level of the ministry, we need to support such initiatives, both financially and not only. Sometimes you may not lack state subsidies, but perhaps maybe information-wise, organization-wise, we are ready to provide the support and help. So do come up to us, and I'll be happy to help you. Let me give you another illustration. In one of the Institute of Grains here in Ukraine, we used to have the largest R&D laboratory with more than 200 scientists and scholars. And a lot of the seed manufactured there was sent and exported abroad. But these days, Ukraine is one of the largest importers, and it's only due to such enthusiasts who want to develop science, IT, Ukraine, and to raise the economy of Ukraine. Only through this combination will we be able to achieve something productive, but not to transform into a raw material supplement or additive, which we are vehemently criticized for these days. So I'm only in favor of such a combination. I do believe that jointly we can withstand and oppose that's something that they're trying to transform Ukraine into an agrarian colony. We will be able to raise the level of our science, IT, in order to become a full-fledged economy of the global level. Thank you very much. We both understand that Mr. Horsch and Mr. Vitali are both ready to become sponsors to the Olympic game of agriculture in Ukraine. We pay a huge amount, hundreds of millions of hryvnias every year as tax. Importers pay no tax whatsoever, no customs duties, and we are obliged to do that. Yulia, what do you think? Dima, thank you for your question. We as a platform are highly supportive of the philosophy of standing together. We even have a slogan of collective impact. We do believe in things that combine various media organizations, scientific research institutes, that at the point of joining their efforts, they can lend by getting qualitatively new projects. And right now we are creating a new basis for our agrarian hub solutions. We are analyzing the solutions available in the world and in Ukraine, and having this helicopter view, not even iBird view, we can see a lot of situations when we can combine startups and find new solutions and new opportunities for them. For example, there are laboratories that sample soil, and some startups that can analyze these samples, so we put them together. There are guys that deal with drones and others that specialize in camera technologies. So once again, we put them together, and this creates the synergy effect. So we do believe in synergies and this creative combination. So I think this idea is very correct. Thank you for your response. The organizers have just informed me that we have about 6 minutes left. So 2 more questions. Again, be concise, and we will be closing our session. But please be reminded, don't forget where we are headed. We are talking about technologies in agriculture. Can I have my question, please? My name is Laura Pasova, European Economic Senate. So my question is to Michael Horsch. Michael, what do you think? You know Ukraine so well. You've been here for such a long time. What impedes investors? What hampers them? What are some of the obstacles? You know, some of the friends in Europe, what stops them from coming to Ukraine and invest in Ukraine? I know that we have some common friends that would like to come here in Ukraine. So what do you reckon?
Well, I'm working in many different countries. I think well, I don't think it's that Ukraine has specifically a bad image about investing into it. I think that's not the case. There's other countries which have a much worse image in terms of about you should not invest there because it's not safe. I think my feeling is, I only can express my feeling because I don't know it, because I only know the agrarian sector, and as I say, I'm not the only one. I have lots of colleagues. They also decide now that they will invest more in Ukraine now. But I still get the feeling, like what you said, that Ukraine has still an image of being an agrarian country, which is not right. You have to change that image. Maybe I'm not contributing much to this image because of the business I'm in, but generally speaking, I think that's first needs to be done. You first need to get away, and this is a political thing also, to get away from being only an agrarian country. I think that's the biggest holdup, I think. Because otherwise, like this young man just said, there should be no reason if you can demonstrate that you are better in doing certain things like financial services or software services or what digital services whatsoever, and you can demonstrate that, why we should not come here and do business with you and invest in here.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Я хочу бути чесними також до наших користувачів Telegram.
I would also like to be fair to our contributors through the Telegram boat. We have a question from Foreign Relations University to Ms. Olga Trofimtseva. How efficient is the potential of Ukrainian technical zones and park used in order to develop the agrarian sector in Ukraine? You can just answer by saying, yes, it is used, no, it isn't used. Perhaps it is used, but how effectively it is being utilized, I think it's an interesting question, but I'm not familiar with the information. But in a way, it may also be an answer, because as I said, because more or less I tried to keep abreast of all of the things happening in agrarian complex, the cooperation between various technological parks and zones and innovative projects probably is not thriving, and it's something that requires extra effort. I don't know who the question comes from, but if you deal with this, please come close to me and Julia. We will be happy to cooperate with you. One more question. Good afternoon. Thank you, Timur, for this opportunity presented to us the question. Hello, everyone. Dear audience, please be brief. Introduce yourself. My name is Denis. AVA Group company. We deal with implementing innovative technologies to feed animals in agriculture. These are cows, pigs, poultry. So the question probably first goes to Olga, because I know that she, for a long time, was engaged in teaching in the past. And I'm really fond of the position expressed by Vitaly Inchenko regarding education, training, and the Research and Development Institute. The question is technical. How much in our country, in the state, at the ministerial level, at the level of intra-ministry groups and agencies, how strong is the strategy, the program for reforming and upgrading the level of the students that have been mentioned today, the graduates, the future agrarians, agronomers, the people that will cater for the future of this land, the ones that will set the pace, and they will eventually be the leaders, and they will be at the helm of the change in the agrarian complex. I will try to be brief. Thank you for the question. This is our pet peeve. This is a really painful and sensitive question for us. I didn't deal much in terms of training, but I was much into theoretical science, especially in Germany, so I would have a lot to say in this respect, but this would be a separate panel discussion. The reform is rolling in Ukraine, but not very consistently, not very systematically, and B, it's not pacey enough, because some of us are fearful to touch upon the old legacy Soviet times. Perhaps, as I said, we do not need 18 agrarian universities which feed children. Okay, let's be honest. we have some prospective students who can hardly count and read, and they are enrolled on the program of higher educational institutions, and then when they graduate, they are not good enough because neither Italian nor Mr. Horsch will be able to employ them because their level is not up to scratch. So what we do, we're just degrading, we're just ruining our own educational system. But instead, we need to get together all of these multi-talented people of the middle level that would be graduated from colleges, from something which is available in Germany, Fachhochschule, it's called in Germany. And here a great role has to be played by the so-called dual education, especially when we talk about the agrarian sphere. I'm a big fan, an absolute supporter of combining practice with theory. When a student comes for tuition, they study for the first semester at the National Institute in KIEF. And the next semester, they go to the Research and Development Institute that Vitaly has, and they deal with practical things, and they see how these plants behave in the field. You see, this is the real way that we can do it, how we can handle it. Don't be so hasty. Everyone wants to rush, but sorry for that. Gradually, things are rolling, are changing in Ukraine. We are working with big, large holdings, and we are moving ahead, we are getting ahead. But education issues, this is not something that happens overnight. Perhaps in one generation or in 2 generations, will we be able to see the first productive things? Well, the last comment, please. But via my education from various agrarian universities across Ukraine, I can tell you that I do encourage them to invite me as a tutor for their tuition programs, and there I will be able to share the things they need, but not the things that some of the theoreticians teach them, the theoreticians who are already retirees and they know nothing about how things are changing and need to be changed in Ukraine. So I keep telling them, let's work together. Our professionals at my company would also be helpful at teaching. So just invite us for practical studies. We do need to teach young students, the successful business people, in order to set good examples, because when you turn on TV at home, sometimes you feel like, okay, I need to pack my suitcases and leave this country. Well, I beg your pardon. I thank this audience. I thank the fantastic panelists of today. Something that I came to realize through our conversation is that in one way or another, all of you said the technologies are fine, but it's people-oriented, multi-talented, people-centered approach should be embraced. And I'm very happy to say that Ukraine still remains a country of highly talented people, and it's so pleasant to hear it from our statesmen, entrepreneurs, businessmen, and our foreign friends. Thank you very much. This topic has been really engaging and fetching, and I can see that we can even hold a whole conference on the topic. So hopefully see you next time at a specialized conference dedicated to high technologies employed in the agriculture. Thank you very much and have a good end of this week.